Okay, my name is Tim, and I'm going to show you how to salvage an older Casablanca Intelli Touch fan. I received 4 of these fans from my son-in-law, who took them out of a house that he bought and he's remodeling off the coast of Maine, and there were about 10 of these fans in the house, and I took 4 of them. And some of them had light kits and some of them didn't. The 2 without light kits that I took, I'm putting in my shop. And I noticed when I got ready to put them in, that as I was looking at the fan, I couldn't find any normal reverse switch or pull chain controls. So I figured I'd better go and get a manual and see how they were supposed to be wired up. Now this is a Casablanca Inteli Touch fan. It's called a Himosa, and the model number is 3911T. And the T means it's an Inteli Touch fan, which is a series of fans that were very popular with Casablanca higher-end fans back in the 80s and 90s. This fan was probably $1,000 or more when it was purchased. They're very good fans. They're very quiet fans, is what they have a reputation for. But they came as an Inteli Touch fan with a special wall control called a W32. And the difference about this fan and why it has no switches or anything on it is because it has a computer in it. And the wall control, the W32 wall control, is a device that came with the fan that gives commands to the computers in the fan to control such things as fan speed, the dimming of the lights, reversing the fan, and a bunch of other functions having to do with delays and reducing the fan or reducing the lighting. So when we took these fans down, they took the fans down, they saved all the hardware, but nobody realized they needed to save the the wall switches with them. So we don't have any wall switches. So I went and started looking for the wall switches. Wall switches are all discontinued, and any of them that you can find out there on eBay or other places are very expensive. They're up around $200, and they also have a conversion kit for this fan so that you can convert it to the latest Inteli Touch system, and then you're spending about $250 or more. So my first inclination was to throw the fan out and just go buy a standard industrial fan for my shop, reversible fan. But I thought before I'll do that, let me take a look at this, let me do some research and see if I can save it. I came across a couple of internet posts about the wiring and the different things in it, so I figured, okay, I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to see if it's just a standard motor inside, and if it is, we should be able to make it work. So what I'm going to be using to make this fan work are a standard rotary action fan control, 3-speed fan control. Cost about $12 at Home Depot. It has off, high, medium, low, and off. And then this is a toggle switch on, off, on, which is going to be used to replace or to take the place of what you normally see as the reverse switch in a fan. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I'm going to show you, we're going to take the fan apart so we can get to the motor. One thing that makes this real convenient is if you get yourself a coffee can like I have, the fan fits in it nice, and you can put the fan in the coffee can, holds it nice and stable. And the first thing we want to do is get the blades off, and then we'll get into the motor. So this is a light cover kit. If you don't have a light cover or a light kit on it, if you do have a light kit, you'll have to take the light kit off of the fan if it's not already off. Get yourself a tray to keep pieces in, and there's 2 screws that hold this light cover or light kit cover. Just take those off. This comes off as one piece here, and then this is just a a filler cover that slips into. I want to set those aside. These two wires here, if this had a light kit on it, this is where the light would be connected to these two wires. So once you get that off, you're able to get to your fan screws, and you can remove the fan blades, 2 screws per blade. Take those off. Take the blades off and just set the blades aside. Now, as I said earlier, this is a Himosa model fan. My understanding, and this is the only one of these fans I've ever seen, but my research tells me that basically all of these IntelliTouch fans use the same system in them. So this should work for any model of IntelliTouch fan you may have. One of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because in my research I found out that a lot of people were looking for the wall controls, and a lot of people who were familiar with this fan and had worked on them and had installed them in the past were giving advice to people that said basically if your fan doesn't work, it's probably not the wall switch, it's probably the computer in the fan. So if you have one of these that stopped working and you want to keep that fan, and it is the most likely the computer that stops working, you can salvage the fan by doing what we're doing today, which is taking the computer out of it. Alright, so once you have the fan blades off, flip the fan back over, and we're going to remove the cover around the motor. So that's these 4 screws right here. They're long screws that hold the cover together. And once you've got those off, you can just take the cover and set it aside. You might want to check that filter on your fan. If that filter is excessively dirty, you might want to pull it out off of here and clean it or vacuum it out. You can see, I think you can see through this one, it's pretty clean. Okay, now to make this a little bit easier, you don't have to do this. You can get to everything you need to right here, but it does make it a little bit easier if you take the rest of the cover off. So I'm going to do that. It'll give you a better view as well. These are a little socket cap screw, and this cap screw holds this clamp which holds the cover to the motor housing. So I'm going to pull that off. Make sure you get the washer and the clamp. That's a 11/32 socket, by the way. And once you take that cover off, you can see there's our motor, and right there is your computer. Now, one thing to notice is these fans generally came with just 2 wires coming in from the top. So depending upon whether you have a light kit or not, you may have to bring in some more wires for this modification. This is the computer. This is the computer module. This is a ribbon cable going to the resistors for the speeds on the fan. And this big plug right here has all the wiring for the fan. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this off, and we're going to pull this plug right here off. You can see there's a clip on the back of it. Just take a screwdriver, lift that up, and pry this switch off of here. Okay, I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a photographer, and I'm shooting this in segments. So I just looked at the last segment and realized I had dropped the motor out of view. So I want to re-show you this so you can see that this is your computer. This ribbon cable goes to this series of resistor pad that's glued to the side of the motor for heat dissipation that controls the speeds with this computer control. And this plug right here is the plug for all of the wiring going to the motors and the lights and everything else and the power coming in. So what we're going to do for this modification is we're going to pull this out, and we're going to end up cutting that off, and then we're going to take this plug out of here. The way to do that is you just pry back on this clamp back here, put a screwdriver in there, and then pry the plug up like that. Okay, now we're ready to take this computer off of here. There's two screws that hold the computer on. You can throw those in your bin, but you won't reuse them. And that just lifts right off of there. Now this is the computer. One of the things, if you're researching this on the internet and people talking about modifying these fans and doing a lot of things, one of the things they talk about is needing a starting capacitor. Well, there's your starting capacitor right there. It's a 10 microfarad capacitor, and all of these 120 volt single phase motors need a starting capacitor. So there it is right there. Now, there's two ways you can do this. You can either get out your soldering iron, you can unsolder that, take it off the board, or you can clip it. I unsoldered the first one. I'm going to clip this one. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this out so I can get to it. So it's held on by these plastic clips back here. So I'm just going to pull those off, because I'm not going to reuse this. This is going in the garbage. And then you can just lift this right out of there. Now once you do that, you can either unsolder the leads from the circuit board right there and right there, or you can just take a small set of pliers and you can clip it right there and right there. And that's your starting capacitor. This piece is garbage. Now the other thing you do is you can just cut this out, cut the ribbon out, and throw that away. That's garbage. Now you've got your plug. You can see that the plug has several white wires. It has a red wire, has a brown wire, and it has two black wires. Now, all the white wires on this go to common. And after we cut this plug out, we'll figure out where each one of these wires go. So the first thing we're going to do is cut the plug out of there. Okay, now you can see where all these wires go up into this cavity of the motor. The red wire, the brown wire, and one of these white wires are for the motor. One of these white wires is for the motor, and one is for the light going down and one is for the power coming up. So if you pull on this, you can see that's moving that black wire up there, so that's power coming in. If I pull on this one here, I can see that that's going to the light kit. Now because I'm not using the light kit, I'm going to pull this black wire out of here, and I'm going to pull this white wire out of here, because I'm going to use that wire for something else. If you have a light kit on your fan, don't do that. So the red wire, the brown wire, and one of these white wires is for the motor. And you can see this white wire goes up, so these are the motor wires. These are the 3 motor wires right here. So I'm going to take, and I'm going to put a twist tie around those or something so that I can tell that those are the motor wires. And then these wires are the 2 power wires coming in that used to come in from the switch. And the switch would send signals over these 2 wires to the computer to control everything else. Now if you have a light kit on your fan and you're going to want to keep that light kit, you will need to run another wire, another black or a blue or a red, through where these 2 wires are. And the easiest way to do that is to just take your 2 new wires and attach them. And the reason I say 2 is because you're going to pull a wire through. So take another white and take your other black or your red or whatever. Attach them to this white up here. And then you're going to pull this wire through here so that you have 2 new wires down here. I'm not going to do it because I don't need it. But then you would have a black wire for your fan. You'd have a black or a red or a blue or whatever for your lights. And then you would have common. Now the other thing you need to do and make a decision of is to whether you want to switch for reverse on your wall or on the fan. I'm going to put my switch for reverse on the fan because I want to run this light with standard 2-wire Romex. If you have a light kit, you're going to need a 3-wire Romex. And if you want the reversing switch at on the wall, you're going to have to run another set of wires for that. So I'm going to show you the simplest way to do it. And if you have the need to have the reversing switch on the wall, you'll have to run the additional switches for that, or the additional wiring. So what we're looking at here is we've got the red and the brown, which are the motor winding wires. And the starting capacitor has to go in between those 2 wires. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach some leads to this starting capacitor, and then we're going to cut some pigtails for these 2 wires, and we're going to put the capacitor in between these 2 wires with a pigtail that goes off to our reversing switch. So I'm going to show you that next. Okay, so I've plugged my soldering iron in, and I've cut 2 short pieces of wire. I used white wire, it really doesn't matter. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach these 2 pigtails to our starting capacitor. And so what you'll want to do is you want to pre-tin your wire where you're going to that you're going to be soldering to the capacitor. My cord's a little short. I'll move it. So I don't have to move the camera. Okay, so now we're going to take these pretend wires and we are going to attach them to the short leads of the capacitor. It takes a steady hand. Now we've got a good connection to our starting capacitor. Like that. And that's one of the things you want to check. Make sure you've got a good solder joint. Because if you get it put together and get it all up there and the solder comes apart, well then it ain't gonna work. Okay, now we take our motor, we take our red and our black wires, strip the ends of them. Not our red and our black, our red and our brown. And then we take our starting capacitor and we connect each end of the starting capacitor to the red and the brown. Now keep in mind you've got to put all this back inside the motor housing, so you want these leads, you don't want these leads really long, you want them long enough so you can work with them, but you don't want them extremely long. Now the other thing you can do at this point, and you may want to do it before you attach them, just because you're going to be cramming all this back inside the fan wiring, is tape these leads up right here. That way you'll make sure they won't short out against the casing or the motor, because these will be carrying 120 volt power. Doesn't have to be pretty, but you want to make sure you cover any open wiring. Now go ahead and hook this back up again to your brown and your red. Now we're going to take another piece of wire. In this case I'm going to use black. I pulled a piece of black wire out of this. Here it is. So you want to take and make 2 short black pigtails. Strip these off both ends. Okay, and then take these pigtails and attach them to your red, the wire nut, and your brown. Now these 2 wires that you just attached are going to go to your switch that reverses direction. So if you're going to do as I'm doing and you're leaving the switch on the fan, then these are just short pieces of wire that go to the switch in the fan. If you're going to put the switch on your wall, you have to run these 2 wires up to the top of the fan, and then you have to continue those wires over to your switch on the wall. Now, once again, we've got now our 2 motor winding wires, the red and the brown, with the starting capacitor wired between the 2 of them, and a pigtail to go to our reversing switch. And then the other wire we have is a common. Now, if you had a light kit, you would have two white wires in here now. One would be your common coming from your power, and the other one would be your common coming from the light and your common going to the motor. Since I don't have to worry about the light kit, I'm going to go ahead and get these 2 wires stripped and tied together. So I'll tie my 2 commons together. Put a wire nut on that. Okay, after reviewing the last segment, I see that I had a lot of the wiring portion a little bit off to the top of the camera, so I just want to recap where we're at right now. We've got our starting capacitor with the two leads that I've soldered to the starting capacitor and then taped up, going to the red and the brown leads on the motor wire. And then I also cut a black pigtail to go in to each one of those motor winding wires, the red and the brown. And these pigtails, which are short pigtails, are going to go to my reversing switch. In addition, because I do not have a light kit, I am now left with just two common wires, one going to power and one going to the motor, and a black power wire. So I connected the two white common wires together, and that part is done. Now I have my power wire and my two pigtails that are going to go to my reversing switch. Now this is my reversing switch. Got it at Home Depot. It cost about $4. It's called a toggle on, off, on. So this is basically a single pole double throw switch. Now when you look at this switch, the center terminal on the switch is where the power lead coming from the wall switch goes. And then the end terminals are each going to go to one of the motor windings, either the red or the brown. Doesn't matter which one it is. Once you get it wired, you'll then have to determine which direction is for which direction on your fan. If the switch is in the center, it's off, no power is going to either one. If it's to the left, it's going to this terminal. If it's to the right, it's going to this terminal. Okay, so now we're going to hook up our switch. And what we've got here is we've got our two leads going to the motor windings, and we've got our black power lead coming down from the top of the fan. So we're going to attach this black power lead coming down from the top of the fan to the center terminal of this switch, and then we're going to attach each one of the motor winding leads to the outside terminals of the switch. So there's my power line coming here. We're going to attach that to the center pole. Make sure you dress it up nice. Make sure that it'll attach and stay attached well. You need to strip a little more off of there. Just make sure when you're stripping this wire you don't pull it down through the motor. Then you have to pull it all the way out and feed it through again. Twist that up good. Now that you've got your power lead attached, attach your motor windings to each end. Okay, there we have our reversing switch. Now we'll want to dress these wires up, and what I use is a wire tie in which we're going to go through and clamp this all in here so it's all nice and neat. So let me get a wire tie. Okay, now we're going to hook up our power switch. So we're going to take the switch and we're going to hook the lead coming down from the top of the fan, our power in, to the center terminal. Then we're going to hook the motor windings to each of the outer terminals. So this is the center, this is the power line coming down. Make sure your wires are twisted well so that they go under the screw for the switch. That you get a good connection and they don't spread out. Once we have the power terminal connected, take each one of your motor winding pigtail leads and attach those to each end of the switch. Okay, now we're done with the wiring. We've got our reversing switch with the power lead coming in from up at the top of the fan up here. We've got each of our pigtails to our motor windings going to the red and the brown motor windings with the starter capacitor connected in between. And we've got our two common wires, the motor common coming in from the top of the fan to are tied into the common coming in from top of the fan. Now we're going to clean this all up so that we can get ready to start putting the fan back together. So I like to use a wire tie for this. So I just take a wire tie and run it in between these cutouts in the motor here. And once you get your wire tie in there, take your starting capacitor with your wires snugged around it. And that'll start to hold everything in place. Keep in mind that your top cover is going to fit in over the top here. Your bottom cover comes up. So all of this is going to be inside of those two metal covers that we took off previously. But if you get it tightened up in there, that supports that, all that wiring. You need to make sure that everything's going to be able to clear when you put those covers back on. Cut out your excess. So you can see that what we've got here is your starting capacitor and your switch, which we're going to mount into the covers. So now we're ready to put the covers back on. So the first step is to take the top cover, which is going to go back on, And this fan was dirty, so it's easy for me to see how it was lined up because I can see where the dirt from the clamps were. You're going to take the clamps and you're going to drop the clamps back over the mounting bolts. Then the lock washers. And then the cap screws, cap nuts. And you're going to tighten these all back down. Okay. Okay, now I've put my fan back on my coffee can, motor side up, and you can see in here I have the motor, there's all the wiring that we cleaned up, and there's our switch. So the next step is for us to put a hole in this casing for the switch to be mounted into. And one of the things to note is the screws that are in here that are coming down to the lower, hold the lower canopy on. You want to make sure that the hole that you put in for your switch does not so that your switch isn't in the way of the screw that's going to come down through there. So because of the way this wiring is naturally laying over that switch, I'm going to rotate this top canopy a little bit to avoid that. So I'm just going to loosen these cap nuts. This was a lesson learned from the first one of these I did. And I'm just going to rotate this cap about a quarter turn. That way I know my switch won't be in the way of the mounting screw. And now you can see the switch is falling in between these two screw holes here. Okay, so the next step is to mount our switch, and then we're almost done. You can see here where our switch naturally wants to come out to the cover right in this area, so that's where we're going to put our switch. And the first thing you want to do is you want to drill a pilot hole, and you want to put it about in the center here. for where you're going to mount your switch. So we're going to drill that pilot hole. Okay, and there's a pilot hole. And now we're going to use a 1/2 inch drill bit to drill out for where the switch will go. There's our hole for our switch. I've already taken the locking collar off the switch. You want to mount the switch so that the wiring is parallel to the cover, and I like to have it so that the screws are up so I can see them. And insert your switch into the hole and then lock your switch down. Okay, my camera battery died right at the end of the last segment. I had to take some time to recharge it, so I went ahead and finished the wiring for the fan up in the ceiling while it was charging. Luckily, we got the whole segment with installing the switch, so here we are. We've got the switch installed, and we're ready to put the fan back together. So I'm just going to check these because I loosened them before and make sure they're still tight. The rest of it's pretty straightforward. We're going to take and put our bottom cover back on. Now, you have to be careful because this is a lip that actually attaches all the way around, and there is a little indentation right here that fits into a notch in the cover right there. So you'll want to line those two up. Like so. Get your first screw started. And these are pretty easy to feel by hand when you're into this, starting into the screw. Just start that first one. Just get it in a couple turns and then go over to the one on the other side. Once again, you have to feel around. Find the socket where that screw sets into, get it started. And then get your other two lined up. Once you have all those in, bring them up a little at a time so that the cover comes together nice and straight and parallel. You just heard it snap together. And we're done. You're now ready to go hang your fan. It's much easier to hang the fan with the blades off, so we're not going to put the blades back on here. But we're going to, I'm now going to take this up. I'm going to put it up into the fan holding socket, and because I don't have a light kit, all I have to do is connect the common to the common for the power and connect the black going to my speed control switch, which I've already mounted on the wall, and then this fan will be ready to go. I'll do that wiring, put the fan blades on, put the cover back over the light cover kit, and I'm done. And that completes the modification to this fan, and it allows the fan to work as a standard 3-speed reversible fan. Okay, so they say the proof is in the pudding. I've hung my fan. There's the first one that I put up there. I just turned the power back on. So there's my fan, and over here is my switch. So let's see what we get. Turn the switch to high, and there's our fan. Now to determine the direction of rotation, I stand under the fan and I definitely feel a strong breeze, which means it's running in the down position, so now I can mark my switch. Now I have two very nice fans to help push the heat down in my shop in the winter and cool me in the summer. Thank you for visiting the first production of Grampy's shop.